This is my review slash, I don't know, description of the Strider SNG CC. This is the Generation 6 Strider SNG, and it's a little bit thinner and meant for, they call it a CC or concealed carry, so they made it a little bit thinner and a little bit less beefy. Some stats on it: the blade length is 3.5 inches with an overall length of 8¼ inch. Closed length is 4 3/4. The steel is CPM S30V. The handle material on this side is G10 and on this side is titanium. The weight of my particular knife is 4 1/8 ounces. So starting with some positives, one thing is that it's an American-made knife, and it's, you know, a relatively small company. You're not talking about, oh, Gerber or Buck or, you know, a bigger company. It's thin, it's lightweight, it fits in the pocket really easily, and it's really pretty easy to carry. It's a pretty big knife, a pretty big folder for everyday carry, but it really shrinks on you, and you don't really notice it's there after a while. It's pretty cool looking, if that's important to you. I don't own any other knives that look quite like it. Some people may or may not like the finish, that tiger striping on the blade. Some people don't like it at all. It doesn't really bother me at all. The feature on this knife is there's a stop pin right here so that your frame lock doesn't push out too far this way, and you don't end up with you know, weakening or stretching the frame lock out over time. The design, I mean, it's pretty robust for an EDC knife. It's got a big, huge spanner pivot here, and it's basically, the pivot is overbuilt. It's very, very strong pivot there, not like some other knives that I have. It's got 3 screws, 3 big beefy screws holding it together. So for an EDC knife, it's pretty robust. I like the clip. It's kind of anchored up here at the top so that it doesn't spin around. It's screwed in and then anchored, and it's a, you know, pretty nice clip. There's some tiger striping on the titanium too, and that's fairly attractive, I guess, if that's your thing. One of my favorite features about it is this oval hole here, and basically that it lets me, it makes it easier for me to open it. I'm left-handed, and this is a right-handed version of the knife, and the left-handed ones are fairly difficult to find, I'm told. So it makes it easier for me to open it. The other thing is that I can open this with gloves on, which is really nice. You can still use the pin to open it, but I find that most of the time when I'm opening it, my thumb is actually pushing on the hole, and then as it gets further up, pushes on the pin a little more. That pin locks into place on the frame there to be, you know, a pretty good stop pin. And that pin, I'm told, is not a screw. It's actually pressed into a hole in the blade, so it's not going anywhere. So other things I've noticed about my particular knife are that the blade is centered. Some people have had some complaints about the blades not being centered when they get their knife. There's no play at all in the blade, up, down, whatever. I mean, it's tight. My particular knife arrived very, very sharp right from the factory. I was satisfied with that. There have been some people that have said, you know, they're not always all that sharp, but I'm happy with the way it arrived and the sharpness of it. Some things I've noticed that are a little bit peculiar are that the G10 side of my knife, if you look at the front and the back, and I'll show you a picture, the G10 side is not as thick as the titanium side. and I'm not sure if that's intentional or if it was just a part of when they were polishing it or machining it down that the G10 side ended up a little thinner. If they'd left it thicker, these stop pins, or if they left it thicker, the pivot pin and the screws holding the frame together could be sunk a little bit, and you'd have a smoother feel over the surface of the knife. Think Howard Hughes in The Aviator. He wanted the plane to be really smooth. Apparently he didn't get it smooth enough. Another thing about my particular knife is that there's a ball bearing on the inside of the frame, and I'll show you a picture of that. And what that does, I'm assuming, is it helps push the frame lock out a little bit so that the knife glides easier when you're closing it. The other thing is that there's a little hole right here in the blade so that when the knife closes, you get this tactile like click, and then when you go to open it, there's a tactile stop, and that's nice. I'm not a huge fan of assisted openers because I don't want the damn thing opening in my pocket, and believe me, every time I've carried an assisted opener, with the exception of the Random Task 1 and the Random Task 2 by Kershaw, the damn things have opened in my pocket. And so I like a knife that stays closed, and the Strider does that pretty well. I will say, however, that there's a break when you go to close it. It takes a little bit for that pin to get back underneath the frame lock, and I've measured this on a digital scale. The pressure that it takes to actually start that is about 10 ounces. And I've only had this knife about 2 weeks, and I've carried it every day for 2 weeks, but it doesn't seem to be loosening up a whole lot. I'm sure over time that wears down. I found something that I'm not too fond of on this knife, and that's the lanyard hole. I'm not sure why they put the tip of the blade poking halfway through the lanyard hole. Maybe it's so that you can tactically cut your lanyard if you need to. I posed that question on a forum, and they said that the lanyard is only supposed to go through one side. Well, where is the room for any kind of a lanyard that you're going to be able to get through there? And how is it not going to bind on the knife when the knife closes if the blade goes halfway through the lanyard hole? And I have a couple other questions. This is marketed as a hard use knife, okay? And it's certainly a robust folder, and I like it, but is it hard use? If this is going to be your only knife, you might want to think about that, because here's why I think it's not hard use. People say that, you know, the pivot makes it so much stronger and resists torsion, blah blah blah, you know, it's a spanner pivot. Well, what is that spanner pivot sunk into? You've got titanium on one side, that's good. You got G10 on the other. How about if I sell you a hardened steel chain and one of the links is G10? Okay. The counter to that argument is, well, the other side is titanium, and you know, that's plenty strong. You're not going to really need anything beyond that. Let's just break that down. Yes, you've got a titanium frame on the other side, but there's a frame lock in it, and you see that cut down the middle. Basically, the only thing that's resisting torsion here is going to be a 1.2 centimeter thick piece of titanium right there. That's it. You know, maybe the frame lock when the knife is open adds some strength. I don't know, but I'm just not sure that a piece of G10 that's literally less than a millimeter thick on the other side is going to really do all that much for you. The counter to that argument, and people are going to bash me when I say that, is that, well, if you knew how to use a knife correctly, you wouldn't have that problem. And yeah, they're right. The problem is, at the end of the day, when you're out doing, when you're, you know, not car camping or driving to the park to screw around and make your YouTube videos. At the end of the day of travel in an extreme environment like the desert or the jungle, say, you're so exhausted that you're just not going to care all that much about proper knife use. You're going to want something that does exactly what you want it to do. You're going to misuse it. You're going to beat the hell out of it. And if it's not made well and it's not truly hard use, the damn thing's going to break. So because of those reasons, and maybe my definition of hard use is different than a lot of people's, I'm going to put this out of the hard use category and put it into everyday carry. And basically what you've got here is a $400 everyday carry knife. It's unique. There's not a lot of knives out there that are exactly like this. The other thing is that this knife, this is the cheap version. There's no fancy adornments. It's not a special edition or anything. These knives start at $400. The counter to that is to say, well, it's an American-made product and blah blah blah, and you can't make a knife of that quality or really anything for $400. So let's see what else is made in America that costs $400. Are you ready? That's a Ruger Single 6. It's the 60th anniversary edition with the nice little gold thing. And I just bought that last night, and the exact cost was $400. Okay, that's one $400 item, made in America, mind you. Here's another one. Actually, this comes in at a little bit under $400. That's a Smith & Wesson 642 in 38 special. $400. Actually, a little under when you actually go to buy them. And finally, since we're talking about an EDC knife, this is a $400 EDC knife, Sebenza 21. And since the Strider, in my book, is a $400 EDC knife, this is a very fair comparison. And in my humble opinion, the fit and finish of the Chris Reeves Sebenza 21 blows this completely out of the water. It's not even close. So I'm sorry that there were some negative aspects to my review. I don't like to bash companies and stuff, and somebody makes their livelihood off of this, and I appreciate that. I am more or less happy with my purchase. If I knew what I knew now about this knife, would I have paid $400 for it? No, absolutely not. I would have paid maybe $250 for this. So take that for what it's worth, and that's only my opinion. I may have traded another knife or a couple other knives to get this, but I would not have paid $400 cash for it, because again, it's an EDC knife, in my opinion, not a hard use knife, and it costs the same as a Sebenza 21, which in my opinion far exceeds this in quality.